I don't know that there's a lot you can do with Luka. And there's a problem because some of these players are so good right now in the playoffs. And if you watch it, you go, I don't really know what you can do. So let's run through some examples of this. Game 1, when Luka was going off again, they decided to double him to close the game. And it was still a game that was in the balance. Hardaway hits a 3 against the help. He's wide open. And then they kept 2 up on Luka so that he had to initiate his pass further away. He found Hardaway for that old Draymond Green kind of free throw line area outlet pass. And then Hardaway makes the play, and it's Porzingis running baseline and dunking because all of the defenses moved up towards the ball and towards the outlet pass, and they've lost him. So there were more examples of it, but they were hard, aggressive, further out doubles in game 1 against Luka, and it didn't work. It didn't work. They got burnt. And I also think there's times where we look at the result and go, hey, the double worked. There's times in the double you think it works because the guy missed the shot, but that's not really the case. So let's look at last night's game with Doncic because the Clippers wanted Zubac, and I'm not saying it happened every single possession, okay? But there's drop coverage, and drop is very simple for the big guy. You have to kind of show against the perimeter ball handler, but you still have to kind of drop back towards the rim and have responsibility for a pick and roll, right? It's kind of like the Trae Young stuff that we see with Clint Capella. We saw it with James Harden, Clint Capella. And if Doncic is doing, I mean, everybody does this, and we can look at these fives that we really like, and then they look terrible as if they're being exposed left and right defensively in all these matchups. It's like we're actually asking them to do something here that is very, very difficult. That's make a decision between 2 probably of the best players. The ball handler, who's probably, if we're talking playoffs, one of the best players in the world that has all these different decisions and options that he can make depending on the help, or the big guy that's rolling behind you may dunk on your head from behind. So Zubac drops against Luka, and Luka, by the way, can keep everyone on his hip because he's enormous. He's 6'9", all of this mass. So if he's not met with a double up there, he's going to get an angle, get side to side. If he's even, he's Slovenian, and then he's going to be able to drive. So that's what he did in this series of plays here in the third quarter. It was drop against Zubac, floater, free money. Okay, we have to make an adjustment. Next play defensively for the Clippers. Doncic has the ball again. He works himself in, and Zubac stays all the way up on him. Hard double. All right. So they were like, hey, don't drop now this time. Meet him at the ball. Go and meet him. Let's get a double on you. And then what does Luka do? Because he's enormous, can also see over everybody, fires a pass to Dwight Powell. Powell dunks it against a small defender who was caught in kind of a rotation scramble, and everybody's running around and trying to figure it out. So then you go, okay, so we doubled him, and it didn't work, just like you mentioned in game 1. There are other times, too. We had 9 different people defend Luka last night. 9 different people. Kawhi can't defend him. Kawhi is not the two-way player he was. I'm not saying he's bad defensively. I do think he floats at times a little bit, but Kawhi has no chance against him. I mean, Kawhi's defensive stuff at this point is a little bit reputation, but I'd also argue I don't know who's supposed to do anything with this guy right now. We could also make the mistake of looking at numbers and saying, okay, well, if Luka went 1-5 against this guy, but 4-for-4 against this guy, have the 1-for-5 guy guard him more. There's an adjustment. Okay, but did you see the 5 shots? Were they quality shots and Luka just missed them? Were the 4 shots impossible to make? That stuff can be misleading. Like whenever I'll look at some shot stuff and I'll go back and pull up Synergy and go, let me look at these contested, uncontested stuff. A lot of times, some of the tracking doesn't even match up to the stats that we'll get handed the next day, but none of us are going to do that every single time for every single player to double check everybody's work on all of that. Okay, so we had the Clippers switching like crazy. It didn't work. Mavs are up 3-2, and they were talking about double teaming them after the game. And I'm like, I don't know if that's really going to work, because we've seen it not work multiple times. And the more you double, the more you get comfortable with it, and the more your teammates get more comfortable with it, and then everybody starts scrambling around and helping you more offensively. Let's look at the Knicks and Trae Young, because Atlanta eliminates the Knicks. Shout out to the Knicks. Successful season. I'll say it again. Successful season. Atlanta's just better than you, and way better than you. And we said it before the playoffs, and a few of you Knicks fans get a little chesty about the talent disparity. Not heard from you since. However, Game 2, the one game the Knicks won. The Knicks have no one who, you want to talk about no one who may be able to defend Doncic. The Knicks physically don't have people, whether it's Derrick Rose getting smoked or Bullock, who basically got him way more. And it's funny that Reggie Bullock went from Reggie Bullock in the playoffs, but that's what happens, a little bit more notoriety, national televised games. Bullock had no chance. So then they go double in game 2 against Trae. We talked about it. DeAndre Hunter got 2 incredibly good looks from 3. He just missed them. Bogdanovich missed 2 threes. This was 4 missed threes, I believe, in about a minute and a half at the close of game 2 when it was still in the balance. The doubles kind of worked, but they also didn't, because, yes, you got the ball out of Trae Young's hands, but Trae made the perfect read and his teammates didn't make the shots. That's really the only reason they lost that game. And there was also a second unit moment there where I felt like Nate McMillan left the second guys out there, but none of it matters. But the point is, you can hard double Trae if you want, and I'd love to see what it's going to look like with a little bit more size, Philadelphia going up against a smaller player. But if we learn more and more now the last couple of years, specific to Trae Young, strength is penalized in this league, and a smaller, slighter frame is rewarded. It just is. So the thoughts that two huge guys defending Trae is just going to shut it all down, he already understands the foul game as well as anyone in the league. He's going to find a way to get fouled. So even if you double him, because the Knicks were incapable of having somebody stay in front of him, and I don't know if that's quickly. I don't know if they should have played quickly more. You can sit there and say, oh, they should have done this, they should have done that. They're just not as good. Knicks just weren't as good, and Trae Young figured it out. Whether you doubled him, and if it were single, he was going to find a way to get to the hoop, and if it's not a floater, it's a lob. Game over. All right, let's look at the double overtime game with Portland and Denver. Dame, what do you do? Okay, before I get to that, off of Dame's 55-point game on only 24 shots in double overtime, and that's only with 10 free throw attempts, so it wasn't like he was at the free throw line all night long. The Trailblazers tried single coverage on Jokic for game one, and it kind of worked, right? And we're like, hey, they won the game. It must have worked. His assist numbers, Jokic has had two weird bad assist games in this series. And then after game two, you're like, okay, they figured it out. Jokic is good to go. He knows what they're doing. It's fine. This game has gone back and forth every single time. And even after Portland won game four in a blowout, they were the betting favorite. So then we go back to Denver. We've got a double overtime game. And guess what happens? The whole like single cover thing with Jokic that seemed so brilliant in game one, it was doubles. It was double teams against Jokic the whole time because they're thinking like maybe we go back to just trying to shut him down. The problem is, as we saw with that incredible pass to Michael Porter Jr. in the corner, it was a half-ass double, which is what's happening with Portland a lot. And the other problem is Nurkic has fouled out of 3 of the 5 games so far. And when you look at the plus-minus for Yusuf on the court, off the court, Portland's far better with him on, but it also is countering the fact that they've got to run Canner out there for a few minutes, which is a disaster, or Covington, or Melo, who gets caught with Jokic at times. But what did they do? They're like, all right, Jokic is out of control here. I joked that I don't think he made a bad decision for an hour of real time sitting there watching that game as Dame's going nuclear. Don't worry, we'll get to him. But with Jokic, you're watching him make every perfect read, and then he waited for this kind of weak double, which doesn't really matter because he was still going to make the right pass, floats it over Covington into the quarter, 1:33 left. Porter Jr. hits the three, 143, 140. Now, when are you going to get to the doubling of Dame Lillard? Here's where the double makes sense. The sellout, I don't care if somebody has a layup, and in this case, they needed a 3, because if you go to the end of regulation where it's 3.7 left, Portland has the basketball, they're down 3, only a 3 can hurt you. Mike Malone apparently never wanted a foul, which I don't entirely blame him for, because I think Dame is clever enough that he's going to read you in a way where he's going to anticipate your foul, or, meaning keeping it on the floor. And then he's going to find a way to get the shot off, and then you're going to feel really, really stupid. I also think no one has done this yet. I would do this if I were a coach. Have 2 players scream and yell towards the guy with the ball in his hands and yell foul. And as you're running towards him to foul him, just stop yourself. Don't touch him, because the offensive player will probably spaz and then think he's going to initiate contact, anticipating your movement. But if you stop and he doesn't see it coming, he may just get off this awkward, terrible shot flailing because he was going to try to just get the foul. You go ahead. Feel free to steal that from me if you want to go ahead and do it. That time, 3.7 left, that's the sellout double, where it's not about concept, it's not about game flow, it's not about all these different things. It's about straight up, hey, we're going to double team you because we don't want you taking that shot. That's the part with Malone. You go, that's not just an adjustment. That one seems fairly obvious, although I don't really blame him for not wanting to double Dame the entire time, because we're still talking about other very capable shooters out on the floor, especially when Portland is small. The other weird negative thing, though, about Dame going like that for that long and hitting all those shots, because it was one of those absurd historic playoff moments. I mean, it's going to be one of those things where I'm not going to forget where I was, even though it was a game 5 in round 1. It kind of shuts everybody else off. It's like the faucet goes off offensively for all the other players, because they're just sitting there watching this guy put together one of the all-time runs of three-point shooting we've ever seen. So I think sometimes when those guys get the ball, we're like, hey, man, I've just kind of been just watching you throw flamethrowers for about 20 minutes here. So I'm sorry that I'm not super locked in. And we had a big McCollum miss in that game as well. So to finish it all off, when you hear people talk about adjustments, it's because I think we want to believe that they're there, right? I think that's kind of how we are in life, that whenever we see a result, we want to think if we had just done this differently, then we would have had a completely different result at the end. I don't think that's really the case, at least when it comes to double teaming in basketball, because it's been exposed so many times once teams actually do it. Sometimes I defer to the guys that are working in the NBA, that I don't think they're all just really bad at their job and stupid. But it is a human nature thing, because if something's going on, I think after the fact, once we see the result, we love suggesting that there was some other option that would change the result. I think we do like doing that. And I also think we like to be involved in the conversation. And I'm not even talking about the guy sitting at a desk in a post game or somebody in front of a microphone like today. This happens. Like, how often do you hear a conversation about a topic you're not comfortable with and say, hey, you know what? I'm just going to lay out. I don't really have any opinions. I'm just going to lay out and listen to you guys because I'm not educated enough on the topic. And that's what always comes back to, like, whenever I hear a guy be like, oh, they need to make more adjustments. I'm consistently, throughout my entire career, incredibly underwhelmed by what adjustments actually are. We had Chris Long on the podcast for an entire football season. And I was like, hey, maybe finally I'll get to the bottom of this adjustments thing. Because how many times have you seen a football presser like, I made an adjustment, they made an adjustment, they made better adjustments, all these different adjustments. You're like, what were the adjustments, though? Is it okay? Can you give me a specific adjustment? Can you tell me one thing that you did differently that I can understand, so I'll understand the outcome a little bit better? And it's so consistently vague and non-informative, it actually shocks me. And I asked Chris Long, I go, hey, what do you guys do when you go in there, you make halftime adjustments? Like, what do you guys do? And he's like, honestly, dude, almost all the adjustments are the back end. He's like, I don't really even know what they do back there. All secondary stuff. And I was like, okay, we're getting there. We're making some progress. Look, it's just worth reminding yourself, because as all these individual players have these phenomenal performances, you may have a moment, you're going to hear someone say it, but you have a moment, you're like, why isn't this guy doing this? The double teams are there. They're actually happening. They're just not really working. We can talk about concepts. Utah has a concept defensively against Ja Morant, and it worked. They're also better. That's the other concept. The Celtics could have a concept. The best adjustment for them is to just sit back and enjoy the beating and watch greatness around you. I'm kidding, but there wasn't, I could do an hour on the Celtics, but I did it yesterday with Ainge and Stevens. I could also do 10 seconds. They're not healthy a lot, and they don't have a top 10 player. End of story. There you go. But next time you hear somebody saying, oh, well, you got to do a little this, you got to do a little that. It's cool. I'm all for trying stuff. But trying something different doesn't always mean it's a different outcome.